AM 650 KGAB, Cheyenne's #1 news talk radio station. As promised, we have Cheyenne City Council President Rocky Case in. And by the way, Rocky says he would more than encourage any calls if you have any comments or questions at 632-6500, 632-3323. Rocky, we have a couple things to talk about specifically this morning, although you said you'd answer any questions. An audit of city finances. What came out of that?
Yeah, so annually the city goes through an audit. This year, McGee, Hearn, and Pies presented the findings to City Council last week, and it's rare that anybody gets a perfect audit. They're always they're digging. They're trying to find things. Where are the areas of opportunity that we can do better? Couple that they called out as significant findings. And again, I want to make clear that it is not McGee, Hearn, and Pye's place to say, here's what you should do different.
Right.
It's not their place to say, this was illegal. It's not their place to say any of that, make judgment at all. It's just a matter of, we looked at the books, and this is what we found.
Okay.
Right. So a couple of significant findings that came to light are, first, there were over 200 daily reconciliations that did not occur in the appropriate time fashion that they should have.
Okay, for a layman like me, I don't know what a daily reconciliation is. What is that?
That's money in, money out. What does the checkbook look like at the end of the day? So
it's money that was spent without explanation? Is that basically what it is?
Well, no, I mean, they're just in the course of doing business. Money goes into the city fund, and some money comes out of the city fund on a daily basis, and reconciling that to at the end of the day what's in the checkbook.
So it just didn't show up,
and just was not done, was not completed.
Okay.
Now there were definitely some vacancies within the treasurer's office. Not here to point blame on that one. There was significant turnover going on at the time, but for that to come to light as a significant finding is certainly telling of the importance of having a good treasurer in place to make certain that the absolute necessities are occurring.
Right.
And then the second significant finding, interestingly, was dealing with grants, and specifically took a look at the Mayor's Challenge Grant.
From the Bloomberg Foundation.
Correct. And so basically the call out there was the city needs to have somebody looking at those on a frequent basis to be certain that the dollars are being spent as related to the grant and the intent of the grant.
And that wasn't done?
Again, it's not McGee, Hearn, and Pye's place to call that out as incorrect, but that was a significant finding.
You need to do it going forward.
And there was a recommendation that new policies be put in place. So going forward, as kind of a result of that, council is taking a hard look at all of the credit card statements, the city credit card statements, to make certain that all of the expenditures back to, I guess, what it would have been January of 2017 are appropriate as related to state statute.
Now, and some of this may not be known yet, but I'll just toss it out there. Last time I checked, we needed to repay $58,000 to Bloomberg. Is that correct?
I think it was about 56, but we're
56?
within it. Yeah, and so a portion of that was not spent, about $33K.
Right.
And then a portion of that was spent. After some back and forth between the city attorney's office and the folks with the mayor's grant, it was a sum was agreed to that this dollar amount was not appropriate. Okay.
23,000.
About 23. Yeah, and change. And so what happened was the city treasurer and the city attorney and probably some folks from the mayor's office sat down and reallocated dollars from what's called the mayor's discretionary fund and reimbursed the grant for that amount. Subsequently, as a result of city council members going through that line by line, again, as related to state statute, and it's 913-105 if anybody is interested. the day that we sat down to comb through the grant expenditures, the mayor did write some personal checks, and I don't have the exact amount. I think it's about $700 as reimbursement to the city, as related to a couple of those line items that may be construed as potentially, again, I'm not. It's not my job to call out legal, illegal, right, wrong, indifferent.
But questionable, maybe.
Well, there's certainly a lot of the charges are questionable at the very least, and as we dive through these statements, and I think we should have that wrapped up by next Friday. But I did find it interesting that after the mayor originally said all of the spending against that grant was appropriate and there's no wrong to it, and then went to the people that gave us the grant are saying maybe not, and then really at the end she took it upon herself to go ahead and write the city some personal checks to reimburse. So
now, do we know those checks were written to reimburse Bloomberg money, or could they have been written for something else?
No. Well, so the Bloomberg money was reverted. So to make the books correct,
right?
Those inappropriate expenditures that were identified by the mayor's grant fund were reappropriated to the mayor's discretionary fund, so that the city could write the check,
cover the money
to reimburse the grant, right? And then after diving in further, then those personal reimbursement checks for approximately $700 were reimbursed to the city.
But do we know if they were for the Bloomberg money or for something else?
Well, they were. Those expenditures were originally against the mayor's grant, the mayor's challenge grant.
Okay, so they did go to reimburse for spending on the Bloomberg grant.
Correct.
About $700.
About $700
from her personal account.
Correct.
And now the $23,000 that was ruled not within the bounds of the grant. What were some of those, and do we know why they were unacceptable? Or
I mean, well, the grant was pretty specific, and the application was specific, and a lot of those charges were meals and Christmas decorations, and just I think there was a teleprompter for $3,000, and again, the one that makes me kind of giggle the most is the $600 book about managing in a dysfunctional environment,
right?
Those kind of things. So, yeah, and you can make a call as to whether those would be appropriate city expenditures or not. I personally wouldn't spend money on Christmas decorations, taxpayer money on Christmas decorations.
Parties for retiring employees, I believe, was one.
Yeah, and there are budget line items that we put in place for that every year. So for retirements and so forth, things like that. But I know at my day job, whenever we're going to have some kind of employee event, if you will, and I'm dealing with very public funds as well at my day job. We take that money out of our own pocket,
right,
and go have a little bit of fun.
Okay,
and we all pitch in together. So.
Okay, I'm speaking with Cheyenne City Councilman Rocky Case. We are taking calls. If you have any questions or comments, we do need to take care of some business. Then we'll be back with more with City Council President Rocky Case right after this. AM 650 KGAB, Cheyenne's #1 news talk show and a news talk radio station in general. I'm speaking with Cheyenne City Council President Rocky Case. And Rocky, we just talked about the Bloomberg Foundation grant money through the Mayor's Challenge program. City paid back roughly $56,000.
Right.
23,000 of that came out of the mayor's, roughly 23, actually 22.3 came out of the mayor's discretionary fund. The mayor, you're saying, wrote personal checks to cover about 700 of it out of her own personal checking account. Moving forward, what do we do to make sure this situation doesn't happen again?
Well, there are very clear policies as to how taxpayer dollars can and cannot be spent when it relates to employees of the city. And for some reason, somewhere along the line, somebody made a decision that those rules don't necessarily apply to elected individuals. So city council is working, and I suspect probably early next year you'll see some ordinance changes to be certain that those same policies apply to electeds, and that when you're traveling, you get breakfast, lunch, and dinner for yourself. When you're not traveling, you don't get to buy yourself breakfast, lunch, or dinner. Those kind of things, just things that make common sense.
Looks like we have a caller on the line. You might want to put your headset on so you can hear the call. Good morning, caller. You're on the air.
Good morning, Rocky.
Good morning.
Question.
Mm-hmm.
Have you had any desire or feeling to run for mayor during the next term or leave your current profession?
I'll just say I've been asked that question a fair bit recently. Right now, I'm not saying no, but I've got 2 young kids, and mayor's a 24/7 job. I just don't know, but I appreciate the question, and May is still a fair bit off, right? 5.5 months to go to get there. We'll see.
All right. Well, thank you.
Thanks for the call. You're getting asked about that a lot?
I've had a fair amount of folks ask me, encourage me, different things. Yeah, it's definitely come up while I've been out and about in the community.
Now, you mentioned here that the council's working on some ordinances so that it will be strictly spelled out what mayors and council members can spend city money for.
One of the concepts here is it's called meals, incidentals, and expenditures. It's something the state and the federal government deploy it. M-I-N-E is what it's called. And you get X amount for breakfast, depending on what town you're in. Obviously, New York City is going to be a lot more expensive than, say, Douglas, Wyoming.
Right.
But depending on where you are, you get reimbursed that federal per diem rate. And you get it depending on the time frame you're traveling. You get that breakfast reimbursement, your lunch reimbursement, and your dinner reimbursement. Now, if you don't want to eat all day long, so be it. And if you want to have $60 worth of wine at night as your dinner, so be it. That's fine. You get X amount per day.
And that's just what it is.
And that's just what it is. So I think we're going to move something along those lines, and no itemized receipts necessary. You get X while you're traveling. No
receipts because it's your money to spend, and that's what it is.
Precisely.
And no questions.
So we're working on that. I don't necessarily want to be the one to throw a wet towel on a good thing, but is it really appropriate to buy thousands of dollars worth of Christmas decorations and catering stuff and on and on? There are other way. Correct. Yeah. So those kind of things, and there are a lot of questions. We're working through this as a council, as a council team. I'm going to make it clear, it's not myself that just decided to go after this. We're really working it through very carefully with the city attorney's office to make sure that it's applied fairly and that there's consequences, right? If you spend taxpayer money on things that are inappropriate, there will be consequences. And what those will look like, we don't know. We're still working on it, but stay tuned in January. I suspect those will be starting to work their way through council.
I'm going to ask you point blank, is this a personal vendetta?
No, this is not a personal vendetta.
Well, the allegation has been made.
Yeah, the allegation has been made. No, there's nothing personal about it. Be on the right side of right. That's it. And somebody asked me after the whole waffle truck, she said that she was paying for the waffle truck at one of her town halls with Bloomberg money. I said, well, that's interesting. I'm going to go see what else we're looking, what else is this being spent on? No, it's not. It's not personal at all. This is business, period. And if you be on the right side of right, there probably won't be questions to be asked. And if there aren't questions to be asked, we can work together more cohesively and just be honest. I don't know if I've said it on this radio show or not, but one of the philosophies that I've tried to live by, and I've kind of developed an acronym about transparency, respect, integrity, and kindness. And the biggest one of those is integrity. Doing the right thing when nobody else is looking.
I'm a little surprised when we were chatting about the South Mike. I'm a little surprised that we didn't have regulations in place on how public officials could spend money if they worked for the city anyway. I guess as a layman, I would sort of expect that to be in place. Maybe I'm naive. I haven't researched it.
I was stunned to find out that nothing is in place as it relates to electeds. I was absolutely stunned. I believe that there are limitations at the state level, but certainly this highlights the fact that there need to be. I don't. We did do a sampling of the two previous mayors' credit card statements, and I didn't see anything alarming on any of those. It was like a hotel for a Wham convention or a meal while traveling or things like this. Certainly, there weren't, upgrading to economy plus or business class. Those still remain to be seen. We're combing through that, but those kind of things just shouldn't be. You want to upgrade, pay for it out of your own pocket.
This also raises the question again of a city manager. Do we need a city manager in Cheyenne? The citizens clearly voted no a few years ago.
They did, and that was a city administrator, I believe, that was put forward. I can't remember whether it was city manager. I
think it was a city administrator, and technically they're not quite the same thing.
They're not. A city administrator works kind of side by side with the mayor, and I don't believe that on that ballot that the responsibilities were clearly defined. Between the two.
Some people had a problem with the way it was written.
Right, and I think that may be why it didn't pass. One of the things I would be in favor for, because I believe that there are a lot of things that need to be uncovered. One of the things that I would be in favor for, I don't know that there would be support, is a brief city manager, somebody that's very skilled and very highly trained in running municipalities, to come in and level set every department. Get it figured out, getting it straightened out, and getting it on the rails, and then moving to a city administrator mayor, where the administrator deals with the day-to-day operations, is skilled and trained in that, and clearly define those responsibilities between the two. I hesitate on that because I don't believe taking the vote away from the people, no matter how good or bad you think things are, taking the vote away from the people for the leader, the CEO of the community, really flies in the face of the way our democratic republic was set up at a national level, which typically trickles down to the local level.
Now, I've talked to people in Casper, and I'm not taking a side on this, but just something I've heard. They feel that they had a city administrator up there, city manager, I believe, actually.
The manager, right.
Who just ran rampant and ran roughshod over people, and they say, don't do it. How'd you respond to that?
I'd say there's good examples, and I'd say there's bad examples. I remember a class I took in college that was basically a book of things that city managers caught people doing. And yeah, so it's a tough conversation. I don't think there is, necessarily a silver bullet, but I believe it's I think that if anything, the last 3 years highlight that it's a conversation that the community should have again, and figure out what that looks like. But I do hesitate to go so far as to take away the vote of the leader of the city from the people.
So far as we know, if you hadn't raised the question about the waffle truck, this whole thing never would have come up?
Well, she was the one that raised the question about the waffle truck. The mayor was, because one of the reporters asked her, how are you paying for this? Right. So frankly, no, I don't think that I probably would have been triggered to look into it. Maybe somebody else would have. But
Bloomberg wouldn't have asked us for the $66,000 back, or $56,000
Who knows what would have happened, but it certainly would have come to light in the audit report that we just received. So they were already kind of saying maybe there's some questions around this particular fund, and so I guess would have come to light eventually anyway.
Now, Rocky, I guess you're in the process of going over credit card statements and stuff like that at this point. Is that right?
Yeah, we've got 3 years worth of statements that we'll hopefully have that wrapped up by the end of the close of business next Friday. And, I'm not going to say that we'll have the report ready for public consumption, but at that point, but certainly by the end of the year it will be.
Maybe we'll have you in a week or 2 or 3 to talk about the results of that. Okay. Looks like we have a caller on the line. And good morning, caller. You're on the air.
Yes, good morning, Doug. What was the Bloomberg grant supposed to go for to begin with?
I don't have the exact language in front of me. It was about downtown redevelopment and downtown blight, and building a plan on how to deal with our empty buildings downtown and things along those lines.
Did they do anything at all with the money?
There were about, let me think, 40. If I do the number, there was $100K total, 56 returns. So there were about $44,000 that after the city attorney's office and others went back and forth with the folks that managed the grant, that they approved and said that is appropriate spending against the grant. So there were meetings, there were planning sessions, there were things like they looked at developing a website. There were a handful of things that were worked on, but
actually never really got much done.
You can make your own judgment after taking a drive around downtown as to whether that paid off or not.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that because I kind of lost out on that.
Wow.
Thank you.
Thanks for the call.
Thanks for the call. And Rocky, looks like our half hour is about up. Any last thoughts for our audience this morning? I guess you're going to come back in a couple weeks, talk about maybe the credit card report and so forth. But at this point, anything more to say?
No, I just say, again, you asked me the question. This isn't personal. We just want to do the right thing and be on the right side of right. And I think there's a lot of great things happening in our community. We've got some good growth happening. We've got some new businesses popping up here.